Welcome to PyroCMS. This series is all about getting started with Pyro and kind of introducing you to the basics of what it is and how it works and how to get started with building something cool with it. So before we get too far along, we'll need to install Pyro, and to do that, let's check out the documentation, and we'll be using the PyroCMS section of the docs. Before we can install, we'll want to make sure that the server requirements are met. These are pretty much the same as Laravel 5.3 server requirements, so assuming you can install Laravel, you should be just fine installing PyroCMS. We'll also want to make sure that Composer is installed to manage dependencies, and just as a heads up, do not create the environmental file like you normally would with a Laravel installation. This is just kind of like a heads up in case you're getting ahead of the video, but Pyro will generate this one for you. So to begin, let's copy the create project command and copy it into our web directory. I'm going to install this into a directory called workbench.local. Aside from all of the Laravel dependencies and all of the supporting dependencies that Pyro uses, all of the core add-ons will be pulled in with Composer as well. Almost done here. And at the end of it, you'll see all of these suggested packages. You can take a look at these and see if anything kind of catches your fancy, but for the most part, this is just the packages that we've installed, suggesting maybe that we install these other packages to make our lives easier. You can take a look at those and install as needed, but assuming we're good to go, let's set up our virtual host. I use MAMP, which I know is not what the cool kids use, but it's effective, it's efficient, and the process is kind of the same regardless of how you're doing it. So I'm just going to add a site called Workbench, and we're going to open up we're going to set the public folder to the directory that we just created, Workbench and public, just like you normally would for a Laravel installation. If you find yourself working in an environment like cPanel or something where it's kind of easier to use public HTML, you can just rename the directory instead of using a symlink. Everything's automatically detected for you. I'm going to leave mine as public and go ahead and choose that and save. The server will restart, and we should be able to visit our website. And the first time we load up the website, it's going to take a little bit longer for all of the raw SAS files and images to compile and cache and get set up for later use. Subsequent loads will be shorter. If you have a problem loading this screen, if you, for example, have a 404, you'll want to check your rewrite and make sure that the index.php is being rewritten out of your URL. And if it bombs out, like if you get a fatal error, what you'll want to do is go back and make sure that your directory permissions are set accordingly. You'll need the public app directory, the bootstrap cache directory, and the storage directory all to have write permissions from your server. You'll also want to make sure that your server can write a .env file. If you find yourself submitting the installation form to install and it fails right away, like if you've got a 500 error, then chances are that it can't write that .env file. So going back to the form, it's pretty simple. Just we've got terms. You choose your driver for your database. As of right now, it will not create the database for you. I have a Workbench database created. It's empty. Make sure the database is empty when you install, because if you have like an old installation or anything, you'll get errors later on with unique information colliding. The database username and password. The username is not used to log in by default, although it can be, so it's a good idea to change this from admin to something a little bit more secure. In my case, I'm just going to leave it. Choose your login email and password. The application name is just going to help identify, in case you've got multiple applications running on or websites running on the same PyroCMS installation, and the application reference is basically a slug of the application name that's going to be used to prefix database tables for that application. It's going to be used to separate storage folders for cache and generated models and things later on. So primary domain is fine, language is fine, time zone is fine. I'm going to go ahead and install. Pyro add-ons use native Laravel migrations to install. So behind the scenes, what it's doing here is scaffolding out all of our tables, all of their indexes, and like setting up all of our module models and kind of scaffolding everything in the back end. This will take just a minute. And after it finishes up installing, the next step is seeding, and this is basically taking any demonstration data and seeding our tables with it. And when this is finished, we should be able to log in. And use the email and password that you set up prior. And you're all set. You will notice that it's complaining about the installer module. It's fine to leave this locally, but when you push to your production environment, you'll want to remove the installer module. And there's two ways to do that. The first is to hop over to the directory, the project directory that you created, and you'll find the composer.json file. If you open this up and find the installer and just delete that line, and then come back over and we'll get into our project directory again and run composer update, it'll remove that folder for you, and you can go ahead and commit that to your project so it doesn't come back later on. The other way to do it, if you're not using Composer to manage dependencies, if you're just pushing up with FTP or something like that, then you can go into the core directory, anomaly, and find the installer module and just actually delete it. And that's all you need to do. Push up your project and it's safe and secure.